Hi, Mike. Welcome.
Hi, Adia. So good to talk to you.
Thank you.
I often feel a redemptive love, and it's wonderful and liberating. It's something I've always felt, but experiencing this course has allowed me to, has put it into words and made it so much of a richer experience for me.
Good.
But when I move in the world, and, this has been going on for 50 years of my life, I often feel this clenching and contracting, cold hands and tight muscles. And I try not to focus on it, but, because I don't want to grasp.
Yeah.
But, I also, it's not going away on its own.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think there's two things that come to mind. Number one is begin, as a foundation, to really begin to turn that redemptive love that you can that you experience onto the places that hold and they contract, especially when you start to relate, the old patterns of relating, because almost everybody has these old patterns of, there was times in your life when, you weren't so defended, when you did relate from a place within yourself that felt very authentic and open and very real, usually as a child, and it wasn't received particularly well. And so those kind of moments create memories, right, within us. And that's what you encounter when you can experience a great redemptive love or a kind of clarity, but that pattern is there that says, yes, but when I functioned from a place that was much more integral to who I really am, I didn't get encouragement for it. I didn't get encouraged. So you sort of re-experience the memory. So, we literally start to live in, as soon as you go into engagement, you're activating the old memory, the old pattern that says, yes, that may be a very good idea to live from that place, but remember how many times in your life when you did so and it wasn't particularly well received.
Yes, or modeled.
Or modeled, right. A lot of times we didn't even have it modeled from us, so how do we know what it even looks like? Right. So first of all is turning that light of compassion onto those aspects of yourself. Because those aspects don't go away just because you go, God, I wish they weren't there, or, I'll just try to put up with them, or what, all the different strategies that we do. But they can be met with that kind of love. You can bring that kind of compassion, that kind of understanding, because these things don't get started in us for no good reason. They get put in place through actual lived experience, generally fairly early in our lives. And we have to, to be able to acknowledge that yes, that these patterns are here for reasons that seem based in my experience. Maybe that experience was decades and decades ago, but nonetheless, unfortunately, that's where most of the deepest patterning actually happens, because we're so open, So just turning that kind of tide of compassion and understanding there, because then that part of yourself, when it rears up and you start to feel the clenching in the gut and sort of the fear and the awkwardness and stuff, if you can turn that tide of compassion back onto it, it can kind of start to relax. And it realizes, it's actually, as it relaxes, you're kind of repatterning yourself. That it's okay when you feel that fear, that it's okay when you feel that love isn't withdrawn from yourself when you feel afraid or awkward or tense. Does that make sense? Let me see, I can't hear you, Mike, so I'm going to do one of my tricks when I can't hear people. I'm going to put you on hold and bring you back up. Okay, Mike, can I hear you now?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now, yeah.
That's great.
Could you hear me?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, yeah.
You were saying that to turn the compassion, turn the redemptive love upon myself.
Yeah.
That are clenching.
Yeah, to those parts that are clenching.
I think that yes, this was taught to me early on, but it's been reinforced through my life, because I think I've had some delusional concepts as to what it means to, be connected and loved in the world.
Yeah.
And when I don't see people responding to me the way I want, I start clenching up and engaging in unwise behaviors.
Right.
And
yes.
it's, I think I might have to let go of that.
Yes, absolutely. Because remember, and we're not making, when I talk about the ego's sort of agenda, I don't mean to paint, I'm not painting it, I'm not saying it's wrong, or just saying what it is, right? So from the ego's agenda, it's really interested in what it receives in return, right? That's what's really, because the ego is inherently insecure about itself, and it's insecure about just about everything. Life, living, and death. That's a lot to be insecure about. And so when it doesn't get what it wants from someone or from a situation, it tends to retreat. It's not getting what it wants, so it retreats within itself. And you feel that even as a physical contraction. That's the ego, which is a psychological phenomena, but it's contracting. It contracts in your emotional life, your psychological life, and even in your physicality. And again, the key is you don't even make that wrong.
Right.
Because the ego isn't, if we judge it as wrong or bad, then we're putting a label on it that doesn't actually, it's not really real. We're making that label up. It's just the way ego moves. That's all. It's neither good or bad, right or wrong. It's just the way it moves, Birds fly and ants crawl on the ground. They don't do that because one's right and one's wrong. It's just what they do. And so ego's like that. So when ego contracts, doesn't get what it wants, there can be compassion for that contraction, because that contraction comes out of pain, right?
Yes.
And so then it's, when an ego meets compassion instead of rejection, which the spiritual person is great at giving the ego rejection, right? Because the ego, even I'll talk about how problematic the ego can be. But if that causes you to be in a relationship with your ego where you're rejecting it, well, that's how all this got started in the beginning, didn't it?
And it's also kind of ironic that I'm responding to rejection with rejection.
That's right. Exactly. So now we come to see the pattern, and we often see, I'm responding to my rejection through more rejection. No wonder that hasn't worked throughout my life. No wonder this pattern is still here.
Yes.
And it also does take courage.
Yes.
Because the truth of the matter for both you and me and everybody else, we won't always be understood. In fact, we frequently will not be understood. We won't always be appreciated for what we say or the way we relate. We won't always be appreciated. We may have different projections put on us that may or may not fit us. There's all sorts of ways in life that we can seemingly do everything right, in a certain sense, and still not receive positive input back all the time. And so there's a kind of courage that it takes where we realize, again, the shifting of the center of your regard to, what's more important to me, what I receive from life, what I receive from everything in life, or what is important is what I am being, what the quality of my existence, the quality of what I bring to each moment. It's a shift of focus, It's a shift of what am I paying attention to? And at first it might take some real consciousness, because the sort of the old ego agendas are just so ingrained and they're so strong that you just, you fall back into them very quickly and automatically. But again, that's okay, and that can be turned around if there's compassion, and then there's just recognizing, I've shifted into what can this do for me, or what can this person give me? And that's always painful.
Yes, it does take a lot of courage.
It does.
Because I am sometimes not received the way I would like, and no matter what I do.
Right. That's right. I know what it feels like. Everybody listening to this program tonight knows what that's like. Sometimes no matter what you do, you won't be received the way that you would like to be received. And sometimes that's the way it is. And and love gives people that option. Love always gives people the option to understand me or not, to agree with me or not, to engage with me in a way that I would be nice for me or not. That's why I always say you have to give your love back to the world too. You know what I mean? Each moment you get to have your experience. I mean, if you were to only do this one thing, and you just try it on for like a day, or a few days or a week, but just try on that. At first it might seem a little awkward, but you just have this intention. The next person that you just engage with in any way, you just remind yourself right before you're engaging, or maybe even during it, but I'm going to allow this person to have their experience of the moment, of me, of us, of life, of everything. I'm going to give them the freedom to have their experience exactly as they do. That's the standpoint from which I'm going to engage with them. And you just try it on. You'll see it absolutely transforms almost immediately the way you feel about being with that person. If from the very beginning you said, okay, I've given them they get to feel and experience and make the conclusions that they will. They get to do that. And if you do that preemptively, because they're going to do that anyway, right? But if you have that attitude inside yourself and you do it preemptively before your ego gets disappointed, you've entered into a moment of relationship from a completely different understanding. You've bypassed the ego saying, I want this, and I want this, and I want to be understood, and I want to fit in, and I want this. And instead, you've saying, I'm going to let this situation be the way it is. I'm going to let each person in it have their experience of themselves, of me, and of everything. I'm going to let them do it. And you'll be really surprised. As soon as you do that, you will feel like you're freed from what the situation or the person is or is not going to give you. Your well-being, your happiness, your sense of security will, at that instant, will not be linked to their experience. And what it helps you get in touch with is what I call your autonomy, your spiritual autonomy. That sense of your own being that does not find itself through the reflection of others. That's not looking for itself through the eyes of others. Sometimes it takes courage to find that and courage to stay there. But just start with this little experiment. You might find that it's quite effective.
I already feel it's, just even thinking about it, I feel the love in it.
Yeah. Because I'm glad you mentioned that word too, because that is the attitude, if I can say, of love. If we meet a situation and we want that person we're preoccupied with what it can give us, what they can give me, what I can attain from it, that's not the stance of love. It's not the agenda.
And I also think that maybe turning that towards myself might also be helpful.
That's right. Right. So everything I could say about doing in your way of engaging and being with the world and with others, you do it also to within your own being, to yourself. All the same. All the same. It'll work just as well either way. Yeah.